Hey, good morning, everybody. Good morning, afternoon, good evening. Whenever you're watching this, good, whatever it is, it's all good. Father John with Grupo Solidaridad. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. This is a space where we kind of talk about the intersection between faith reflection on the gospel, on the particular feast, and the Christian tradition out of the Catholic social justice tradition. And and so if you are down with that, that is very, very cool. Want to really include that you, however you're watching this, put your comments in the comment box, especially if you're watching on my page on Facebook or YouTube. And I don't know, but anyway, put the comments down. And then if you have a request for prayers or you want to kind of lift something up or agree, that's great. There's part of the talk today also is for people that are really interested in contributing to an ongoing conversation that is kind of shaping our conversation around Thomas Aquinas and tyranny, and looking at that kind of perspective, that is a shaping our interpretive lens, our critique of what's happening now in American governance. We'll be running that series of articles as part of the communique, which is a written newspaper that we're newsletter that we have, not written, but it's out there, and that particular communique will has the written reflections and the series of short essays that are accompanying that written reflection on the gospel. Those short series of essays will run all the way through July 4th, leading up to and including Independence Day. So I want to welcome all of you that are here, and I think we're just going to kind of get into it right now. Let me see. I'm going to pull up my little notes here. White House, or as people are now calling it, the White Trash House. Why would they be kind of denigrating the White Trash House? Well, it's because it's demolished. There's like a bunch of tools and stuff that's left out, and giant holes in the front yard. It looks like an unfinished construction site with demolition everywhere. They're building a stage to have a party in the front yard. Now, a lot of people will have parties, at a community center or in the backyard or in the side yard, but generally not in the front yard. Now, in my neighborhood, people sometimes did that. The garage door would be open. Like my dad would have the garage door open. He would, he wouldn't have a big party, but he'd have the guys, some of the dads from the neighborhood would come over and they kind of hang out in the garage. And the business was open because whoever had the garage door open, the dads would walk over to the house and just kind of hang out. I was not invited. Anyway, I'm working through that with my therapist. But anyway, there was this. It was just sort of like you do that, but it's like a white trash party is something different. It really is. It's just something different. Anyway, and generally, it's really fully on White Houses when you have like a wrestling match or a bare knuckle brawl in your front yard. That's what makes a difference between kind of having neighbors over and hanging out, and then putting a wrestling ring or a fight ring, a cage match in your front yard, and then have a bunch of really bad entertainers. I say I think it is good. I know when I was playing music in high school and college, you always kind of want to have a gig where you're have an audience, because a lot of times we didn't have audiences when we were playing, or audiences that are paying attention to you. And a lot of times, people that sort of made it big when you knew their star was fading when they'd end up, performing at the county fair. So this was supposed to be the state fair, which is a bigger deal. That was the theme of Trump's party. Well, I think it's looking like more like a county fair, or even worse, perhaps like Here we used to have the Park Beach and Recreations concerts when I was growing up. They'd play down at either Oddstead Park or just down the road. They would have a band, usually a garage band from one of the neighborhoods we would be playing, and that's kind of what this is turning out to be, a little on the white trash side. So anyway, White Trash House, yay! Well, let's look at some other good news. I don't know if that's good news, but let's look at some news here. Because it is really, we can think of really bad things like Santa Clara County. Their DHS is going to be putting in looking to put in some kind of a facility in South County. We're really spending some time to investigate what exactly they're going to put in and adjust that and kind of really try to understand what's happening without alarming people and making them go panic, because we don't want to panic. We want to organize, folks. Remember, no panic, organize. Don't get angry. Get smart. Don't get desperate. Get focused. So these are the things that I want to say to folks. So this is the good news to kind of give us a framework, because there's a lot of difficult things going on right now. But the White House is thrashing like a rabid raccoon in that's somehow escaped into your house, or has found refuge in your house, and you have it cornered with a push broom and a giant kennel cage. You're going to take it to the vet, or to the county park, or where you have people that take care of cornered wild animals. That's kind of what the Trump administration is going through right now. But in light of that, as we start to find our way through the rubble of democracy, let's look at some good news. And so the good news are, number one, birthright citizenship looks like it's going to survive. So that's a positive thing. The observers all across the ideological spectrum are saying, hey, the court, that the court may ultimately strike down the president's the executive order, and therefore preserving the long-established interpretation of the 14th Amendment. It would be a huge setback for the administration's central immigration initiatives. TPS, or temporary protected status, is remaining in place for now. It's basically a waiting game until we can wait this administration out and push it up against the ropes. That will be happening in November, hopefully. Fingers crossed. The court has not yet ruled on the underlying issue, but the fact that protections remain in force means that families that are not going to face immediate removal, especially while their cases are in court. Next one is Federal Reserve's independence is showing signs of holding. So that's really, really important. There's a bunch of efforts by this regime, this junta, to remove Governor Lisa Cook, who's the Federal Reserve governor. And right now the court is allowing her to stay in office. So a lot of pushback there, which is great to hear. States are continuing to advance climate policy. Yay. It's a reminder that meaningful policy change is happening not on a federal level now, but they've just changed the venue, and it really is going to the states. And so we're getting really smart. We're organizing people, organizing neighborhoods, and people are fighting back against data centers. They're fighting back against, obviously, the DHS construction, which has a huge impact on the environment and land. People are fighting back. They're getting smart. They are not taking this shit anymore, which is great. The courts are really still being a venue for resistance. So it looks like even the Trump appointed judges, some of them are just saying this is too crazy. This is really batshit crazy. So they're kind of holding back, and it's so there is going to be some review of immigration policies, citizenship questions, agency firings, and voting rules are demonstrating that this junta, is not invincible. Also, there have been some special elections going on this way, and national headlines are indicating that there are victories, are not necessarily indicating there's policy successes, but they're showing that within the Republican voter bloc, there are, MAGA holds still substantial, if not more, power. Or do we want to look at the actual numbers of those who are showing up to vote? And those who are showing up to vote are the hardcore MAGAites, or as some people call the maggots. The MAGAites, or the maggots, however you want to call them, they're showing up in huge numbers and supporting MAGA candidates. Meantime, normal Republican people, the people that are in our families, their friends, those folks are not showing up, or they're holding their nose and voting, but they're really not enthusiastic. But on the other hand, when you look at the Democratic Party, a lot of people see the jungle primaries and all these kinds of things about here in California. I think what that does is, people kind of wring their hands and bemoan that. I actually think that this huge amounts of Democrats are running for office. I don't think there's a huge conspiracy behind it, but I do think there's a lot of energy, and that's an indication that there's an incredible amount of energy among progressives, and that the real civil war that you want to look at is within the Democratic Party. A lot of centrists and institutionalists, like Pelosi and Joaquin Jennings, Schumer. They represent a kind of an old guard, which is very institutionalist, which is very ready to kind of make deals and move forward. And that particular wing of the party, the centrist and corporate wing of the party, is finding a real fight with the people that are grassroots, the people that are coming from the base, and those that are candidates are coming out of the base who are not taking APAC money, who are not taking corporate money, who are not beholden to what they call special interests, and we'll see how that one goes, but we'll see. They are actually kind of nipping at the heels of the centrist Democrats. So that, I think, is a more interesting fight to watch. I don't think it's just for sheer entertainment. I just think for purposes of those of us that do find the study of politics and social changes, that is very interesting, an interesting fight to watch, because that's where you're going to start seeing really where the country is, because that's where the most of the people are at in that question of, are we going to go the traditional path forward and build on the legacy of what has gone before us, which is a kind of an institutionalist perspective, or are we looking with a large number of people on the edges and the margins, and these are often people of color, these are people who are economically marginalized, people that are working in the working party movement, the people that are part of a labor contingent, they're part of the people that are religious progressives. These people are starting to kind of crowd these primaries and these markets, and you're going to start seeing that force, and they'll have to be reckoned with rather than belittled. So I'm finding that things are going to be very, very interesting moving forward. And like I said, that's not going to be true in every region, but it will be true in a lot of blue areas, solid blue areas. And it's something to watch for. I just find that really interesting. So we see people like Chris Rabb in Pennsylvania, 3rd Congressional District. He defeated a better funded and a very established institutionalist candidate. He pushed him out. I already said this before a couple of times ago. Analilia Mejia in New Jersey, she pushed out her more institutionalist person. You're looking at other kinds of things. There's a certain generational shift that's happening. Christian Menifee defeated long-term Congressman Al Green. It was in a Democratic runoff. And while it's not an ideological contest, it's showing there's a real pattern that, like I said, younger candidates, marginalized candidates that are from a much wider background that are not willing to play ball, that these are guys that are really, guys and gals that are really, truly driven by anger and driven by looking at perhaps building something new rather than building on what was gone before. So it's going to just be a very interesting time in politics for the next few years. So if you are interested in being a political scientist and are looking at this, go for it. That's really interesting. What I want to do now is kind of jump into this other part of, I'm going to read through the second introduction, the second half of an introduction that is part of a larger series on Thomas Aquinas and tyranny, and using the lens of Thomistic theology, or Thomas Aquinas, Thomistic is after Thomas, Thomistic theology, which is kind of classical Catholic theology, and looking through that lens as a way to have a conversation with what we see is developing tyranny in the United States. The tyranny is already here. Fascism is actually happening. It's not like it's starting to happen. No, it's already established. And if you don't think it has, then you're not. I don't think you're reading enough, or you're not seeing it. But fascism is here. We also know that fascism in Europe and other places where it's been successful, the overlay of fascism really didn't stick there very long. And that's true. I mean, in Spain, it did last quite a while. Portugal, it did. But the question is, unlike Europe, the United States has a much longer, more vibrant population that is used to a culture of dissent, because that's democracy. We've had a long culture of democracy. So while we do have fascism, there's no dispute around that. But the question is, does it have its holdfasts, its roots, as strong and as deep as it has in other countries? And I would say no, because there has been fascist there's been attempts for fascism and monarchy, and all those kinds of those elements have been since John Adams and other kind of political figures throughout the course of American history, political history. There have been kind of movements in a direction of kind of instituting the privileged to hold the land and centralizing power in the hands of a few for the benefit of the many, the best way that they would describe it themselves. But that is not holding. That is proven not to actually hold. What we have here is there's tremendous amount of capital that's investing in making this happen, with the billionaires that are clearly on the side of Trump, very transactional. The question is, do we the people still have a voice? And I would say that we do. Not, I'm being optimistic here, but I think that we do. But I also believe that it's still one person, one vote. Even if you're giving corporations the opportunity to actually cast a vote, which apparently in some places they are, that's really problematic. But on the other hand, we still have a vibrant democratic culture, and therefore I don't think that what's happening here is going to hold. And we, as I said in the very beginning, we're already seeing signs of that facade cracking. We see that the white trash house is falling apart, which is kind of it's kind of a visual to what we're seeing in our own politics. We're seeing this craziness happening. So let's stay strong, folks, and let's be positive. But now let's kind of look at really quick at Thomas Aquinas before we jump into the gospel reflection. So Thomas Aquinas, I'm just going to read the second half of this, so I'll be more reading it for you because I don't think everybody's reading the communique. So recall, this is building on last week's first half of the introduction. This is the second half of the introduction. Recall Thomas Aquinas' definition of law. Law is an ordinance of reason for the common good made by one who has care of the community and promulgated. Our previous essay noted that Thomas understood legitimate authority to be evidenced by just laws, and likewise illegitimate authority to be revealed by unjust laws. We might therefore ask ourselves, how do laws become corrupt? And is it possible that a legitimate king who begins as a good ruler can become an illegitimate one? So let's begin by establishing that for Thomas, legitimacy is conditional, not immutable. He assumes this position because all human beings, including kings, nobles, and bishops, are subject to sin. In De Regno, Thomas argues that the greatest danger facing political authority is its gradual descent into tyranny. Tyranny begins when a ruler ceases to govern for the common good and instead substitutes the common good with private interest. The office remains the same, but the purpose changes. Note that Thomas does not believe that political institutions are inherently corrupt. Rather, he believes that human beings are sufficiently frail to be seduced by power and privilege. The corruption of authority begins when rulers gradually confuse their own interests with the interests of the community. When a king begins to seek personal advantage and privilege over fairness and justice, he has already taken the first steps towards tyranny. As the ruler drifts further from the common good, opposition and resistance naturally begin to emerge. In response, the tyrant increasingly adopts a repressive posture towards his subjects. What began as governance slowly now becomes domination. Thomas understood that tyranny cannot easily take hold where people are educated, organized, and capable of acting together. Tyrants, therefore, become suspicious of independent institutions, strong local communities, and relationships that foster solidarity. Tyranny flourishes when there is fear, suspicion, and blind obedience, that is, compliance without questioning the intentions of those who wield power. By contrast, Thomas believed that a just political order depends upon relationships, trust, and what he called civic friendship. The common good cannot exist without social trust, and the social trust cannot be manufactured by decree. It is built slowly through shared responsibility, mutual accountability, and sustained relationships among the citizenry. The tyrant fears such relationships because they limit his power. The just ruler cultivates them because they are the very foundation of a healthy society. So that's kind of it. So that we're going to just develop those ideas that we finished that second half of the introduction, and we're going to just kind of expand those ideas in subsequent articles that will be written between now and July 4th. So we'll have a series of other articles coming out, or essays, as it were. And again, you're invited to be part of that conversation. Just simply email me, and then we'll include your comments as part of that. And if you don't want attribution to your comments, we'll just simply won't put your name. But if you otherwise, we will kind of say, hey, and this is from so-and-so, this reader or this participant in Grupo has made that comment. So those are really kind of cool things. It's just we're kind of creating this together. A lot of this stuff is, in conversation with a lot of people. I think that it's a very interesting time. I think that we could see that Thomas Aquinas would probably be more in Nancy Pelosi and Joaquin Jeffries and Schumer. And the reason would be is because a lot of those people kind of came out of that classical education model. And what we're experiencing now with younger generations of more progressive voices that may not have bought into that institutionalist model of power and governance, like Aquinas. It would be very interesting, but nonetheless, I waver between institutionalist and progressive. To be honest, that's kind of where my social political location is. But there's a strong validity in terms of what's this moment, and we're in a unique moment. And this unique moment will definitely require more than an institutional response. It will require a widespread citizenry rising up. And Thomas Aquinas, believe it or not, makes that argument. And so we're going to find out how he would make that argument in terms of a population and the citizenry rising up against tyranny. And it is not just an observation that happens, but it is an obligation in which the citizens do that. So we'll kind of get into that in the subsequent reflections of Thomas. So even Thomas would see that kind of general strikes are not unheard of, and perhaps at least as we start to read him more, that you can see where he makes that argument that is at least for him theoretically possible. It didn't actually happen in his time, but it is theoretically possible. And keep in mind that he's writing in the 1300s, so around that time, 1200s, 1225, around there. All right, so let us take a moment and take a breath. We've been racing with a lot of thoughts. Take a breath in and release that breath outwards. As we breathe in all the world as the world is, and just simply don't judge it. Just let it pass, and don't hold on to it. Just kind of recognize the tension in your life, the tensions in the world. And as you hold that breath, invite the divine to transform that into love, healing, forgiveness, and now just release it to yourself, because I am all somatically connected. Our bodies are connecting to that tension. And we just need to kind of acknowledge it and just release it outwards through our bodies. So we breathe outwards love, healing, and forgiveness on ourselves. So we become that filter, as it were, for the world and the energy in the world that's very negative and tense. So we breathe in again, hold at the top, invite the transformation, and release that love, healing, forgiveness to your soul circle, the people that are in your family or in your circle of friends and your chosen family, perhaps, the people that heal you, forgive you, accept you, and challenge you, people you feel connected to. Next set of breaths. We breathe in and pause, invite, and transform outward love, healing, forgiveness, and let's pass it on to the people that are around us. You see them every day. Perhaps people here in community, people at work, you don't know them, but you want to kind of come across. You want to show up as love, healing, forgiveness, and not as a bundle of anger. You're simply showing up to these people that you know. You're connected to them and already. Let's take this next set of breaths. In, hold, transformation, release love, healing, forgiveness. But this time, let's really show up even to our enemies, that we don't exacerbate that tension and that hatred and that ignorance and that violence. We show up as love, healing, forgiveness, and even pushing it away. It's like the dawn that inevitably scatters the darkness. That's what this is. That is, you have that power of love, healing, forgiveness. Light always conquers darkness. And let's take this next set of breaths. And now we're going to release that breath of love, healing, forgiveness through our bodies and into the earth itself, that we are generating that, connecting to that earth. We connect to the ancestors of the earth, people that lived here before us. In my case, it's the Aramai communities in the here in the coast side where I am. It's part of the Ramaytush Ohlone speaking peoples, that nation here, and honoring their on their continued conversation around the Ohlone way here in the coast side and much of the Bay Area, and wherever you are, just acknowledge those first peoples. Even if in Europe they have the first peoples, the the peoples that are the Germanic tribes, wherever you are, wherever those first human beings that settled and created balance in the land. We've often forgotten that balance because we've allowed systems of greed and control to guide our steps. And rather than those first peoples who came to the lands and they found a wisdom of balance, we connect to the planetary system itself, to the galaxy and the family of galaxies moving in impossible speeds through the expanding universe. As we expand outwards, that breath that released this energy outwards, where all of us are traveling together in the breath of the divine. All right. So this is actually not a very long reflection because the gospel itself is fairly clear. It's very short. And let me read it to you because it is short, but it's incredibly profound. And I think you're all used to it. It's from John chapter 3, 16 to 18. God so loved the world that he gave his only son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish, but might have eternal life. For God did not send his son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him will not be condemned, but whoever does not believe in him has already been condemned because he has not believed in the name of the only Son of God. Hashem, the name of God. This is again a verse that has been weaponized, and it has been also used to promote both the love and as well as the exclusion. Let me just kind of go through this gospel so that you kind of understand that those who use this and focus on the condemnation of those who do not believe in the name of the only Son of God, those that use that particular last line versus on focusing on the line that says God did not send his son to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him, that God, that God's motivation, the divine, the Hashem, the divine name, the holy source of all things. God did not, create us to condemn us. It's out of love. And so, what would love be? What is chesed? Chesed is that mercy, that all encompassing, generous, without measure connection of care and healing, which is that is the motivation. If anything, that God is love, is John's gospel and the letters of John would indicate God is love. Well, that means that God is not a thing, but an ever unfolding process. So that we would like to think of God as something that's external to us and outside of our kind of view, but that just is kind of very distant. And so what the Gospel of John is suggesting is no, it is that if you think about God as source, as a thing, then yes, you're going to say God is something out there, and then we are here. And therefore you're placing God as a kind of a thing that exists apart from us. There is a whole host of mystical teachers coming out of Galilee, that came out of Galilee around the time of Jesus. And then some of them kind of landed by the Dead Sea. And these mystics were looking for more than just a kind of seeing God as creator and a master and then just setting the world in motion. But rather they said that God is experienced. And that's all I could say, that, Yud Hey Chav Hey, that, this is the Yahweh, is the breath of God. It's the reality of Yahweh, which is, it is breath, right? The burning bush. It is a a complexity. It is something where two truths can happen. There is a burning, and there is also the surviving of the bush. It is kind of idiosyncratic. It's something that we just really can't see. It's an irony that therefore the only resolution to the irony is a person that is experiencing the irony, which is you and me. That that we are not saying of God as a particular thing or making a doctrine about God. All we have is a Trinity, is a triune God, but we say that his God is first of all to be experienced, and that proximity, the experience is based on a proximity of love, that you experience love, and so that experience of love is for Christians is mitigated in and through the person of Jesus, meaning that you have some kind of a connection to Jesus as a rabbi, as a teacher, and as Lord, right? As Kyrios. Now, out of a Judaic background, that you would substitute that thing of not saying Jesus, but you'd say Torah, that the laws of Moses, the Torah, and Jesus always refers to, and in the preaching, and certainly God and the Gospels is very consistent that he is speaking about Torah as a living reality, and that we as human beings become the living Torah. That's Jesus's mystical way of explaining that God's law, God's conversation with us, is contained in these books of Moses, not as a list of laws and policies and procedures, but it's a living conversation to understand what does it mean to remain in relationship to land, to those who are aliens in our midst, the workers, and to our neighbors, the people that we are in community with, and as well as the demand that we need to exert on those who are in positions of authority, those that are charged with and given the stewardship of a human community. And we interpret that as called that the state. The time of Israel will be the kings, or the time of occupation will be the empire. But it's the idea that all these elements of connection to you, connecting to the divine in you, connecting to the people, the divine in others, connecting to the people that are in charge of this kind of keeping human community, but also connecting now also that last part of connecting to the earth. There's these elements, these four elements have to be in place. That the Torah has these laws and precepts that keep that conversation going. So the Torah, if you're out of the mystical Jewish tradition, which Jesus is, it is a ever unfolding conversation that does not end. And so when Jesus teaches his disciples, is you're going to get to that going through me. So the purpose is that Jesus himself is connecting people to the divine, a direct connection, an immediate direct connection to the divine. When you have that direct connection to Jesus, and then of course later generations, it'll be to Jesus's teachings, and then of course later generations upon reflecting about it, but it's also connecting to us, and that's where the sacramental system comes in, is that you connect to a sacramental people, a people who contain the holy within themselves because they are that community, and that's where we get the idea of a church as a form of a kind of a sacrament in itself. The community itself becomes the way, the truth, and life, that this community of people that connection you have with them is how we find and amplify that experience of the divine that has already touched us in our hearts. So again, that all comes out of this idea that God is love, that God is not condemnation, but God is creating this peace. And that's Jesus as a rabbi is teaching that mystical teaching to us. And that's kind of where this is at, right? So God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that so everyone who believes in him might not perish, but have eternal life. So the idea of giving his only son, again, looking at that proximity of God for Christians in the teaching of Jesus, is that son is a containment of all that is of Torah, of all that is love, of all that is energy, of all that is spirit. That is that God's motivation is already baked into creation itself, and that motivation is love and healing, forgiveness, and wholeness. And so goes on to say, the Messiah is not here to condemn the world, but that the Messiah's role is not to sit in harsh judgment, to divide who's in and who's out, but to heal, to tikkun olam, that to heal this broken world. The world is saved through him. Now, when we hear that word saved, we immediately think of who's saved and who's not saved. That is not in the mind of the gospel writer. The question of saving is, you have empire and you have that people who are not empire. And that empire has imposed particular precepts and a system that is exploitive and that does not allow for the people, the community, to thrive. So it is about the saving is the dismantling of empire. So that's how we would want to understand that versus you're a holy person that follows the rules and you're an unholy person because you don't follow rules. That kind of thinking is not really what's baked into the scriptures, but rather it is looking at the structure of how do you live within this world, and that the saving is, are you participating in the healing, or are you participating in the exact of creating pain and hurt in the people? So again, empire creates that structure of pain and repression, and we call that a narrowing, an imposition, a constriction. Or are you part of the liberation so that people can truly live free and live in abundance? The question is that the answer is self-evident. Well, who wouldn't want everyone to live freely? Who wouldn't want everyone to live with a wholeness of connection to community? Who would not want to live with that? Who would imagine a world where you enjoy the pain, where you enjoy the incarceration, where you enjoy the separation of families? And that's not what that's about. It is about opening things up. So whoever does not believe has already been condemned. So meaning that you already have your heart set on separating families, creating pain in the community, of throwing people into the dungeon and closing the gates and losing the key. That you are fine with collateral damage of those who don't fit into our already existing system of how we want the world to be. Because this is kind of what we're looking at. And so those who have not believed in the name of the Holy Son, the Hashem, the holy name, will just never get it. So again, there are people that are in acknowledging in the Gospel of John, there's empire that is in itself, the empire can't be saved, but the people who sustain the empire can be saved. So it is all about what Thomas Aquinas calls it, these relationships that need to happen, this kind of connection with people. And we'll see another theologian that speak about, as we look at Trinity, as the experience of God, Spirit, your experience of the historical Jesus, the Son, and that which is the Father. These are all connected. These are all connected experiences that we experience in different phases of our human existence and of our life personally. That this is why we call that the triune God. That there's many ways to describe more clearly what it is. And because Christians have this Jesus, the incarnation of the divine, because they have that, what we call that the second person of the Trinity. They have Jesus. That's why we've come up with trying to explain the incarnation of God. So this question of Trinity, that terminology, it just became a way to explain how we as Christians see that Jesus is fully human, fully divine, in history, external to history, constantly with us, and experienced in community and experienced in history. So there's this kind of complex understanding of the divine that is very tangible, and even in history itself, in a person. Trying to explain that, Christians have kind of found a way using Greek terminology to explain that. I have a kind of a small bit of quick history of it, painting in very large stripes and not in details, but that's in the communication. You can read that more detailed. So thank you all for watching this. We'll want to kind of close with the Our Father, and then we'll go into just see you next week. So if there's any questions, please put our prayer requests, put those into the comment box. We'll jump into those, and then we'll just kind of close our time now. So we close and pray. Our Father in heaven, holy is your name. Your kingdom come, your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Folks, I'll see you all next week. It's really great to be with you. Ciao.